Always a big fan of the data-driven ecosystems that you've driven throughout your career. So Braun is SVP of Worldwide Channel Sales and Ecosystem at Citrix. I'll let her introduce herself, her role, and what she's doing at Citrix. Braun, over to you.
Thank you. And I'll maybe start with a little bit of my history. I've been in the ecosystem most probably too long. I had a long history at SAP and at Oracle, and now I'm at Citrix. And really, my time at Citrix, I've come in to have a look at how do we grow the ecosystem to be a more substantive piece of our growth strategy. And in particular, as we move forward and we move from an infrastructure company, how do we move to the cloud and to value? So that transition in the ecosystem and the channel is one of the key journeys that I'm really looking at as part of our transformation.
Awesome, awesome. And Braun, you may want to flip your video back, toggle it back one more time. Yeah, much better. Now we can see you.
Can you?
Turn it back on again.
Is that better?
Much better. Now we can. So thanks for that introduction. And very quickly, I saw a big, brand refresh happen earlier in September at Citrix, and obviously it's coupled with a larger strategic change as well. Can you speak about what you've changed in the strategy there, and how partners are central to that strategy that you're driving?
I made a slight mention to it as I started the conversation. Really, we've been known in a number of areas as an infrastructure company, very strong on productivity from an infrastructure point of view. But we're transforming ourselves to is to be a business that's not only providing secure access for what people do from anywhere, and that's why my background is sort of working from anywhere in this picture, but most importantly, is to deliver employee experience. So secure the person, secure the app, but at the same time have that productive experience that employees can do their best work. So that's one of the changes that we're going through as a company. And we had a brand refresh when we went through recently, trying to get the essence of that. When we think about that, and then we look at moving from this infrastructure, and I like to describe it two ways, moving from infrastructure to the cloud. And the second is moving from infrastructure to value across a customer's entire capability. And if you think about those two dimensions, it really brings and I was listening to that previous conversation and some of the comments, it brings a few things in the poll to light. Where do you get the innovation? Where do you get the value for customers coming through as a partner ecosystem? How do you actually transform businesses that maybe have been an on-prem business or the customers choosing hybrid environments? What does that mean for the ecosystem? And where do we really derive that value from? So in our strategy, we decided that we needed to expand the ecosystem. Our history had been very much about a resale channel. Mm-hmm. And the resale channel brought absolute value and continues to do so. But to get to these higher value statements, we really needed to also bring that cloud services and capability to the front. And we needed to be able to have companies who wanted to be at the front end of value, changing how someone works, not only making it more efficient. So that's where we started to expand our ecosystem and looked at what strategic relationships could we form that helped both our customers, of course, but our partnerships in the channel and our other strategic partnerships. So seeing that I'm following Microsoft was one of them. We said, what would we do with Microsoft to, really expand that experience for the channel, the strategic partners and the customer as a whole. And what we started to do was look for those synergistic relationships that are like puzzle pieces that come together for value for the customer and allow us to improve the partner experience and at the same time improve the customer experience. Last comment I'd make on this, it wasn't only single directional expansion. It was looking for the puzzles that come together naturally. so that we can form that solution approach for the customer and take away the frictionless technology approach and the frictionless selling approach.
Yeah, maybe it's a good time, Andrew, if you can bring up the slide that we had referred. So yeah, Braun, why don't you talk about this motion, this channel that you're kind of the puzzle pieces you're putting together?
You know, as I said, we looked really for where are the synergies rather than just channel expansion or partner expansion. We really looked at where would we have the puzzle pieces to accelerate value, and how do we bring that value to each of these partner types. I will sort of start to answer one of the questions that's coming up ahead, where, you know, we look at what were our priorities and why. We focused on people, process, and technology, because one of my fundamentals are that you can't manage what you can't see. So I really focused on how do we get the transparency so that partners can work with us in the right way, we can work with them in the right way, and how does that come together in a collaborative way. We focused on driving an enhanced experience with our ecosystem partners. So what were they experiencing in this transition, and how do we know that something is working? Really important when you're doing transitions from an on-prem business to a cloud. How do you know it's working and the partner's getting value and the customer's actually deriving value from the same time? Results are always important. So of course, everyone said on the poll, results are important. So how do you make sure that you're always progressing to those results? And fundamentally, is the customer getting value from all of that? So, you know, when we looked at this, we looked at how do we drive the engagement that allows that to happen. And Amit, you know my view on this. We all have programs, and I listened to Dan talking about programs and the speaker before. We all have programs. We all have ways partners can participate. But what makes successful outcomes happen is the types of engagement and the transparency that we can get, and how we can start at the offering level and see that transparency all the way through to delivering results. So what I looked at when I expanded the ecosystem is, how do I do this in a way that allows you to start early in the way you intend and to drive it through to a successful outcome in a transparent, bi-directional way. Not one directional, bi-directional, and keep that engagement constantly looking for value.
Yeah, Braun, I'm a big fan of how you've driven the data-driven transformation of ecosystems first at SAP and now at Citrix. So talk a little bit about how you're operationalizing it and especially what role WorkSpan has played. And Andrew, if you can forward to the ecosystem visual, that might be a good.
I always call this my spaghetti slide. The reality is, and I will use one of our partners, I won't use the name for the moment, but one of our partners that we're working with, what they wanted to do was they wanted to approach a customer with a platform approach that allowed them to synergize a technology ecosystem in a way that this could be brought together in a solution approach, and that each player knew the role that they were playing. So, you know, when we started out with these engagements, that's where we started. We said, you know, let's start with the expanded ecosystem. Let's start with the companies that we are now trying to activate to be part of bringing these ecosystems together. And we actually started with, I'll share it as well with, for example, Microsoft, and part of that announcement that you made being connected to the Partner Central as well. We looked at all of these synergies and how does that help our channel that exists, and how does it help the strategic relationship, so that we set up those first. We went with a Microsoft as an example, or a Google, and we went with the strategic SIs that we work with as well. And that allowed us to really start with offerings first, understand how that offering is going to be utilized, clearly have a targeted approach for where we intended that to be targeted, and really have a clear list of accounts that we were working with, and then start to monitor from the beginning how that operational excellence in an engagement would work. The positive thing for us on setting it up from the start in this way is that it's giving us the insights from the beginning. It's allowing us to see early what's working, what's not working, and it's allowing us to really get a best practice for building an ecosystem that's a multi-directional ecosystem with insights from the beginning. So that's sort of my, the team's been excited because they didn't have these insights before. They didn't have the ability to see how partners were engaging and the focus of what we were doing. And the last thing I'd comment on this is when we approached this, we were looking to build, I would say, how do I say this? We were looking to build the value of differentiation. And I often talk to the team about, I'm not looking for the lowest common denominator when I engage with a partnership. What we're trying to help each partner realize is the highest differentiation. And what this allowed us to do is to start from that premise. We weren't trying to standardize everyone. We were trying to build that uniqueness that brings value to each business and brings value to each customer. So that's sort of where we started and why the team was so excited to start going down this journey.
Yeah, I really like that comment around not settling for the lowest common denominator, because if you see our old experience with things like partner portals, for example, kind of designed for the lowest common denominator, right? You want to scale to everybody in the world, and hence you tend to settle for less, but for everyone. But in this case, you're holding the bar high.
Correct.
That's a fantastic insight. As I see the spaghetti or the spider chart of ecosystems that you're driving, people are playing many roles: services, hyperscalers, technology partners, all in this. And it's an agile partnering ecosystem. But this must not be easy. There must be some real challenges. So give us some insight as to what challenges you are facing right now. And I can assure you, this is a very trusted community here. It stays within this room as a little bit. And if you can tell us a little bit about your challenges and how you're addressing them, it will perhaps help us who are going around in this journey.
I always start, and this may sound like a strange place to start, I always start with transparency. For me, it challenges not being able to see as you transition whether what you're doing is making a difference. You make all these assumptions when you design things. You have your assumptions that you're going to use on targeting things. So transparency for me is number one. If we can't build that transparency, we can't be agile. We can't see when we need to adjust. I have a key principle, which the team has learned fairly quickly when I've come in to drive this, is I don't want to report on history. I want to create the outcome. Mm-hmm. And if you think of that as a principle, it shifts all your reporting and your analytics from backward looking to being transparent from the beginning and creating the outcomes that you want, not reporting on history. When you get to the end of something, you should already know you're going to make it. And, that history is really just, yes, you've got to tick in the box. So, that's a challenge to think that way. You move everything to the front end and agility as you go along, right? And So that's one. The second is agility in a changing world like we've got right now. And I don't think anyone would question the year we've just gone through. We had a plan to get to where we are today. That plan didn't take any of the course we thought, because it took some dips and turns with business continuity, but the agility to still be able to course correct back to a strategy and be able to see it and manage it is a challenge. I mean, the journey we've been on this year has been go left, go right, and then go straight. But we had to have that end point in mind. So we've landed where we wanted to be. But the agility to be able to adjust and keep your end point in mind is very top of mind for me. The third for me is how, as a community of professionals, and I'm trying to lead in this way, whenever I look at how we do something, how can we as a community of professionals really create what we want the future engagements with partners to be, not just fix the past. So, one of the challenges I challenge our teams every day is, are we creating the future or are we fixing the past? And think about why I would say that. When you're moving from on-prem to the cloud, when you're moving from infrastructure to value, if you're fixing the past, you're not creating the future. So in these transition points, are we creating the future in our programs, in our way we're incenting engagements with partners, in our customer interactions, all the way through the life cycle of transparency? Those are the challenges we're facing, because that's what every cloud, company transitioning to the cloud goes through. But how do you create what people want to move to, not fix history?
Oh, that's a lovely quote. Create the future, don't try to fix the past. Love it. Braun, you're one of the ecosystem leaders who's also leading a channel as well as an alliances organization at the same time. Yep. Can you talk a little bit of that mix, if you will, and how that channel transition is happening as cloud and cloud services are emerging?
What I'm finding, is it's an interesting question. I asked our channel recently. I said to the channel of quite a few hundred partners, I said, help me understand which of you are already on the journey and what do you see as cloud is, right? And I've just come off an advisory call, so it's very fresh of mind for me too with the partners. First of all, they said, obviously, everyone sees cloud differently. But the number one thing for me that they said was, a third of the partners said they already have the services and are already in the cloud. You, Mr. Vendor, i.e. me, Citrix, we are pushing you. That's good, right? They're pushing us to be better. A third of the partners said, we are building our services in the transition to the cloud. And a third said, we're still an on-prem business. What I took away from that is the channel is defining the future of cloud in whichever way they wanted to participate and differentiate in the cloud. But they're on the journey. 2/3 of them are already there. So for us that are creating programs, we think it's, everyone's still not in the cloud. 2/3 are already going to the cloud and building services and managed services around it. But at the end of the day, the second thing they said to us, and I asked them very directly, and I'd love to get people's feedback. I said, what's more valuable to you, on-prem business or cloud business? The first thing they said was, of course, on-prem business, you've got more control maybe over your margins and those sorts of things, but a multi-year annuity revenue business is more valuable to me. And that's the journey we want you to support us in. So when I hear that, and then I talk about the alliances that we have or strategic partnerships, whilst it's different, the actual challenges are the same, because everyone's trying to remodel how do they actually differentiate in a cloud world? What's their value proposition versus a differentiated value proposition of the others? So when I look at the strategic partners I work with, I always talk about unique differentiation. No, don't ask me to bring you to parity. Parity is not where anyone wants to be. Ask me to bring you to unique differentiation, and let's serve customers with that unique differentiation together. So those are the sort of the, one is transitioning to the cloud, bringing value, trying to find their value denominators. And the other is don't go to parity. Parity is not good for any of us, right? We all want to go to uniqueness. And that's really resonating in how we're building now that differentiation.
Absolutely. I think it's a tremendous advice to some of these channel partners as well. As they build towards the cloud, they're 2/3 have evolved. They're building their differentiation through services or through IT.
Yes.
So that's amazing to hear. Yeah, I want to now turn to another key topic that was kind of the theme throughout, partner to partner. And you kind of course, highlighted about this. Can you describe how Citrix is going through that journey, partner to partner, starting first with Microsoft, but you may have larger plans as well?
I use it as an example, but in fact, every one of our larger relationships, we're looking at it as partner to partner. I won't use the name, but if you look at some of the GSIs that we're working with, they may have a platform that they're trying to formulate. That's formulated from multiple technologies. It's not formulated from one. And if we want to play in a synergistic way, rather than make ourselves single dimensional, we have to learn how to cope with ecosystems forming solutions, not just bidirectional relationships. So we truly are looking at ways to bring that together and to understand the ecosystem we're living in our solutions. Which ecosystem are we in the lead? Are we one of? How do we bring this together? How do we mutually form those ecosystems, again, with transparency and clear understanding of where we're driving outcomes? So that's what we're doing. I mean, we're early days. We're starting this journey as well, but it's one that I think for all of us as people in the ecosystem would truly benefit from.
Awesome. Ron, one more question around people, process, and technology piece. So you've driven the strategy, the change. You've changed processes and metrics and things like that. Almost as if it's second nature to you. But you've also put in a technology platform with WorkSpan behind it.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about? You of course have a great project team behind this. Sue and Trisha, they've done an amazing job with this thing. But I wanted to ask you, what does it take to put in technology? Because a lot of ecosystem leaders that I see around, they struggle even making the case that they need technology. What do you have to say to them?
It's an interesting question because you have to have a conviction, first and foremost, that to be able to manage, you have to have technology. And that's why I always come back to the things I say is, how do you manage something if you can't see it? Technology is the thing that's creating that. For me, as you know, our business case was clearly about and this is not sharing anything confidential, but it's about the incremental drive that we can get through having technology that allows people to work synergistically together, create working teams, and drive those incremental outcomes. I will share that once when I was in the business case phase, someone said to me, well, what's the incremental revenue? And there are two ways to answer that question for me. One is it accelerates your capability to get to opportunities. And the second is it gives you incremental performance against how you're actually able to deliver results. So for me, my business case was very clear. And I don't know any other way to do this. The second thing I would say with the WorkSpan situation, which is when you're dealing outside of your own company, you want one version of truth, and that will always be your internal sales systems. But how do you get to a staging environment where you can have the true business that's external being reflected and then allow it to be part of your one system of truth.
Mhm.
And I think that's the second thing that, that we always appreciate about the WorkSpan situation is it is a staging for you to be able to really validate your business and then make it a part of one version of truth. So your business case becomes very, very measurable, extremely measurable. It's not that system over there that's a partner system. It becomes a fundamental of how your strategy starts to work and how it underpins it. So
Awesome. Any other words of advice? And as you speak, I'll open it up to the audience to ask questions as well. Any other words of advice for partner leaders who are listening on this call?
I would just close with what I have already said. Be leaders of a new partnering experience. Don't fix the old.
Wow. Chip, questions, comments from the audience?
Yeah, this has been fantastic, Braun. Thank you for sharing across a broad spectrum of topics today. And we actually do. We had a lot of comments and then a couple of questions as well. So so Rudy, I'm going to butcher Rudy. I'm going to butcher your last name. Frickin Schmidt, I think, who's actually dialing in from Finland tonight. So late his time, which is awesome. Thanks for joining us. He said, does Citrix compensate your own salespersons for creating ecosystem solutions or only on Citrix license sales?
So salespeople are paid on Citrix license sales. However, if you think about moving to a platform play versus a horizontal play, the use cases that drive that license sale become partner solution driven. So there's a synergistic value between that. And you can see the complementary drive that drives value for both.
You ultimately end up driving revenue if you built more innovative.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, love that. I think the rest have actually been, Rudy says, thank you. Very clear answer. Thank you, Rudy. And I'm seeing a lot of comments. Great insights. Thank you, Bronwyn. Subhajit Roy from Tech Mahindra says, good to see you again. Love that part on tracking and viewing the highest differentiation for partner rather than looking at the lowest common denominator. Rana Call also said differentiation trumps parity every time.
Mm-hmm.
And Rudy also said, excellent presentation, very clear and straight to the point. Love to have you speaking to our ecosystem community partners as well at Fujitsu. So good. I think that's any other questions? I'm just looking at.
Yeah,
I think that's it. Yeah, that was it for questions. So great.
There are two more questions, Chip. So
session.
you can take them. Chip, on the Q&A panel, Mark says, just reading this.
You know what? I missed that. Sarita and Janjani just asked also, do you recommend sellers to work with partners with specialized solution focus on customer problems in the infrastructure space? Good question.
That's an interesting question as well. I mean, I always think that, how do I answer this? I always look for solutioning rather than product selling. So my fundamental answer would be yes. When we just sell products versus when we're looking for partners that are solutioning for customer needs, we always drive different outcomes. So my answer is always yes. I'm looking for that value extension.
Good. Okay. Excellent. And then Mark Horner asked a question, also said, what good things surprised you about the WorkSpan offering, which was unanticipated?
I've been around WorkSpan probably for longer than most. I would say that what I would say not surprised me, but I'm really glad is starting to be present in the offering is the multi-partner engagement, because bidirectional is a good starting point, but the ecosystem now is, I don't even call it triangulation anymore. It could be a hexagon or anything in between, right? So I would say it didn't surprise me, but glad it was a direction that WorkSpan started to go in.
Thank you.
Actually, here's another question. Subhajit just asked a question saying, are you seeing any advantages with cross-pollination between the channel team and the strategic alliances? That's a great question. Love that question.
That's a really good question too. From the point of, I will explain it this way, and I'm hoping people would understand this on the call. When Citrix was driving in the past, it was driving a resell channel. So even strategic partners were being driven as resellers. As we've looked at this to say we don't only look for resell, we look for the solutioning and the value available through bringing solutions together, it's changed the dynamics, and it is cross-pollinating because some of the people that were being driven like resellers are now becoming solution partners. And so they maybe, rather than getting stuck in a definition, are doing what they believe would grow their business and bring the most value. So the answer is yes, but it's because we're actually allowing it to be more flexible in delivering value versus driving it in a very resale way. So it's a strange answer, I know, but that is why it's happening.
So we've opened the floodgates now, Braun. Another couple of good questions. So Vikas Kumar asks, if two very similar GSIs are competing for the same RFP, how do you evangelize and strategize the best path forward?
I go back to what I say. Obviously, we've got a baseline product set, but I am always looking on how to build that unique value proposition. So the GSI is competing on their value enabled with our capability. Because everyone, even if there's two GSIs, people have very different points of view of how they're going to actually respond to an RFP, define value for what the customer's asking for. And that's what we're trying to do, is to allow people to bring that value to the surface.
Great question, Vikas. Thank you. Vikas is with Cognizant. So, excellent. I think, unless there are any last questions or anybody wants to raise their hand and I'll open the mic, I think we. And Braun, thank you so much for being a good sport on these, getting hit with all these questions at the end. So really appreciate you joining us and sharing your insights.
No problem. And thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Braun.